We were talking about your vision of how systems can be shifted, and you'd gone into the three principles that you really believe need to be absolutely foundational to this process. So,
Yeah, I'll go over it again, Andrew. The first is that broken heart where we care, where compassion flows, is vital because that's the space where we are one with each other and we know it. And it's wonderful for me to see that worldwide, doesn't matter what level I'm
yes,
working in,
yes,
that space is available to all of us. And that somehow through our process of socialization, work, some perhaps is needed, but we've shaped ourselves in a way that we don't source that space moment to moment. Because sourcing that space is joy. It's not heavy, it's like seriously light. And the second that we spoke of was, our ability as human beings to see patterns.
yes.
And that somehow we've connected the formulation of policy and seeing patterns to formal education
And
and
experts.
experts. And not that expertise doesn't have a role, of course it does. And so, what we haven't managed to do is to really engage human beings in looking at the patterns that are keeping the problems where they are, the invisible rules of the game, and to be able to actually participate in being game changers. The third dimension is that related to expertise and knowledge and skills, and that we need to do something. And to do something in today's world, we need to have some amount of expertise. And by expertise, I don't mean just degrees. Of course, there are spaces like I was saying, you're a surgeon or an architect or a lawyer. We need expertise in that domain, but we also need expertise to be in action and get a job done. So for me, in systems change, we need to access these three domains. And the mental faculties required for these three domains are not the same. It's not all a logical linear process. And so how do we, you use the word fuse, and I maybe we use the word integrate and synthesize, and maybe we use the word emergence. Because how do we have emergence where the, the result has a direction, such as dignity and fairness, but is not 100% predictable.
Right.
So how do we allow that space to emerge? And how do we source it based on our values? How do we see patterns that are working, patterns that are not working? And how do we look at transforming them? That's about systems transformation.
Howard Gardner has this magnificent diagram of the 5 kinds of mind
Yes.
that we need, and I find
Yes.
this tremendously helpful.
Yes.
We need the disciplined mind that
Yes.
is able
the
to really,
mastery over something.
and then we need the synthesizing mind, the capacity to see patterns and to understand how they
Yes.
interrelate.
Yes.
We need the creative mind,
Which
that
is
can keep
sourced
on.
from within.
That's it. We need the ethical mind,
Which is embodying principles.
and we need the respectful mind.
Which is about dignity in action.
Bringing those 5 kinds of mind together is the task of those who truly want to be sacred activists and system changers and midwives of the new.
Absolutely. I also love the work of Donella Meadows, which to me sort of ranks the different different strategies and their possible impacts. And she very clearly says that to really get paradigm shift, need to work on this space that is about a different worldview,
Yes.
sourced from a different set of values, and that's what will create the most powerful change in the system.
You've been working at the highest levels, working with very, very intractable, very difficult systems for years and years and years. Give me some examples of how this vision of yours has had real impact in different realms. Give me 3 examples of how
so
it's
the
worked.
first thing is that the positive side of how society is organized today is that we are able to articulate problem. We are able to say that we have enough food, but there are too many people going to bed hungry, or that we have children being sold for commercial sex work. So let's go to South Asia, and I'll begin there. And a colleague of mine and I, we worked on stopping trafficking to the extent possible in South Asia.
Children trafficking? Or?
Children trafficked.
Oh, God.
Part of the
sex work.
The sex,
yes.
yes, the world. And so in India, we had forums where we had people who were commercial sex workers, police, pimps, everyone go through this process of discovering who I am, to know what I stand for, to be able to create a different future. So we asked the question. An average pimp will say, I am compassion. I keep this going because they are clients. And they are the ones who want this. So basically, I'm serving society. That's the perception with which he or she will live. And then there comes a moment where you can allow them to inquire, because this whole process is based on inquiring, as to what is it, if I am compassion, what's what's incongruent in this space where children are sold? What happens when kids are sold? What happens to their life? And so they will describe what happens to their life. And then they will talk about their interpretation, the stories they have. And one of them will stand up and say, I'm not going to do it again. And we had data that showed that less children were sold. So for me, this is fabulous, that we could actually create impact. So I'll take you to the Arab world. And a colleague of mine, Khadija Mwala, who's a human rights activist from Tunisia, she had been working with religious leaders, and we were working to have access to treatment for people living with HIV/AIDS, because the perception was that they are promiscuous, they are sinners, and they don't deserve treatment. How could we get access to treatment? And then there's this whole Nile pharaonic practice of female genital mutilation.
I remember you being very passionately involved with ending that.
And we worked, I'll recount a moment in Djibouti. And so we had these women from different parts of the Horn of Africa. And we had religious leaders, both men and women, both from the Christian faith and the Muslim faith, because this is not restricted to Muslims. And we walked them through who am I? And basically at the end of 3 years, they ground themselves very firmly in who they are as human beings that are powerful, rather than their formal role of being religious leaders. And there was this moment, an average imam will say, I am the mercy of Allah. And most priests will say, I am the compassion of Christ. And truly, there is a space in them that resonates. Yeah. And so this woman of 28, she just stood up and she talked about her experience, what happened when she was 5 years old, no anesthesia, she fled, and the whole room was silent. This is what happened. And she couldn't pass urine, she was just in so much pain. And there were like almost tears in people's eyes. And one imam stood up and said, they always call me mother. Mother, I commit that I will have a fatwa against this. And he did. And people got against him from the religious groups, but he stood there. And now in so many mosques, they have sermons that say this is not okay. So for me, this ability to stand in who I am, inquire without making yourself wrong into what's not working, noticing what's happening, taking action to shift the norms that are largely invisible, and shift interpretation. So like we said, well, what does this mean? So for me, it's so possible. People have said that it will, thousands of years of tradition cannot be broken. Sure, I believe that every human being has this inner power, and this work is about manifesting my greatness. It's not about making people wrong.